Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Football Talk from the Yorkshire Post, where we'll be discussing some of the latest talking points from the world of football with members of our football writing team. On this week's episode, we're joined by Chief Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Stuart Rayner, and Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Neil Wobschall, to discuss all of the latest developments affecting our local clubs. Don't forget you can keep up to date with all the football news across Yorkshire and beyond by logging onto our website at yp.sport@nationalworld.com, as well as checking out our various Twitter feeds, the main one being at YP Sport. If you search for Yorkshire Post Sport, Yorkshire Post Football, or even Sheffield Sport on Facebook, you can find us there as well. And if you have any questions for our writers, you can get in touch using those various Twitter or Facebook pages, or email us directly with the subject matter as Football Talk Podcast at yp.sport@nationalworld.com.
YorkshirePost.co.uk.
As mentioned earlier in the intro, this week we're joined by Chief Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Stuart Rayner, and Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Neil Wobschall. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, firstly this week we start in the FA Cup, where Sheffield United advanced to the semi-final stages where they will meet Manchester City. This came after an amazing victory against Blackburn Rovers with Tommy Dawes' amazing strike in the 91st minute. What do you think their prospects are when they meet the defending Premier League champions, and do you think that this could sort of interfere with their push for promotion, Stuart?
Well, I mean, let's be realistic about it. They're playing Manchester City. Their prospects aren't great because Manchester City are such a good football team. But you know, it's the FA Cup. Anything can happen on the day. I think City are playing that game a couple of days after a second leg in the Champions League against Bayern Munich, and it's the game before they play. Not long before they play Arsenal as well. So you never know. But, I mean, as to whether it'll be a distraction for Sheffield United, I think it's fallen quite well for them. You know, in terms of the quarter-final, they've obviously got a fortnight now without a game to sort of get that excitement and distraction of Wembley out of their system. And then when it comes down to it, yeah, it's an extra game, but it is only one more game. I think any negatives that might come from, you know, the extra workload, the distraction, whatever you want to call it, are more than wiped out by the week they had. Not just with that tremendous win and the way they achieved it, and you know the way the ground was and all that sort of thing, but also their big championship win over Sunderland in the build-up. I mean that was a huge week, and again, you know, Middlesbrough dropping points against Stoke, it all added up to a really big week for Sheffield United, a real morale-boosting week. And, you know, you hear lots nowadays about the negatives of a cup run, you know, the distraction, the extra workload. And, you know, there are negatives, but there's positives too. You know, there's a lot to be said for just enjoying winning matches, enjoying playing in front of your own fans, enjoying scoring stonking goals like that one Tommy Doyle scored. And Paul Heckingbottom knows this, of course, because Paul Heckingbottom won promotion with Barnsley, having taken them to Wembley in the Football League trophy. So he could see what good that can do. And I just think the way they are at the moment, you know, the pressure Middlesbrough are putting on them is pretty serious. So I think, you know, you've got to see the positives there. You know, the fact that they're in this position despite all the, you know, ridiculous things that seem to be going on off the field. Sheffield United are close to, you know, the Premier League. They're playing at Wembley next month. You know, they are enjoying their football. The fans are enjoying their football. They can't be thinking about the negatives. They can't be worrying about, you know, how many Man City might score at Wembley. They just should go there, show what they're made of, enjoy themselves, have a good day, and if they don't win, then okay, well we'll just have to win promotion.
Yep. Yeah, I mean I totally agree. It's a total free hit, isn't it? They'll have all the neutrals in the country will be behind them. You know, obviously from a Sheffield United perspective, they'll be wanting to create a monster shock in it, and it would, wouldn't it? But you know, it's. If they go out, if they make a good account of themselves, supporters have a really good day out. It's the culmination of a really good cup run. I mean, there's been a lot of talk from from the Middlesbrough end, saying it's a distraction for Sheffield United that take their eye off the ball. I don't necessarily agree with that. I actually remember when Middlesbrough themselves got promoted. I think it was 97, 98. There was a real frenzied battle for promotion with Nottingham Forest and Sunderland, and one or two others as well. And that season, Borough got to the League Cup final, but lost to Chelsea. But it never derailed them in terms of the league. They ended up finishing second behind Forest. So I don't necessarily read all that into the fact that you go to Wembley, it's gonna affect your league form. I think the bigger thing for Sheffield United really is just making sure the big players are on form and fresh for the running. I'm sure, obviously, we've got the international break now, and Paul Heckingbottom will be. I think he'll be crossing everything that the likes of Nadai and Sanderberg, Ahmed Hodges as well. Just all come back without any injuries. Obviously, they've got a really sort of packed running. I think there's only about one midweek break they have now, haven't they? But I think if everybody's fit and mentally fresh, they can take this extra game in the stride. And what a game as well, as Stuart said at Wembley. So no, I don't necessarily see it being a problem. They've got some young, hungry players there, and they've also got some seniority as well. And just enjoy it. It's a free hit.
Yeah, and one element in that regard, I mean, one thing that is seriously going to hurt them at Wembley, we were speaking after the game to Tommy Doyle after the game and before the draw had been made, and everyone was thinking, please don't let it be Man City. Not just because it's the hardest tie, but because Doyle and McAtee, who are both on loan from Manchester City, won't be able to play in that game. But what it does mean is that two other midfield players are going to have the chance to step up. There's going to be real competition for those places, and then those lads are going to be able to put their feet up that weekend and come back for the midweek refresh. So it will almost enforce a bit of rotation and create a bit of competition, because that's there's two elements when you've got a game like that coming up. You worry about people just having in the back of their mind as they go into tackles, I don't want to get injured because I don't want to miss out on Wembley. But the other situation is you can create this atmosphere of, well, look, if you don't get stuck into these tackles, you won't be playing at Wembley, and people really, you can really use that as a motivational tool. So it's impossible to say at this stage what way it'll go, but I really don't think with the mindset around that football club and this whole culture Paul Heckingbottom has of no excuses, that it will be a factor, because the other part of the equation, winning promotion to the Premier League, is so big. It's not like they're being distracted from mid-table matches. Those league games arguably matter more for the players. Wembley's as much a reward for the fans as for the players. But yeah, just exciting times, and just why if I were them, why talk about the pressure? Why talk about what can go wrong? Why not just enjoy the fact that you might not have it this good for the rest of your career? So make the most of it.
Yep.
I think as well, looking at the games, they've got two home games, haven't they? Before the semi against City, they've got Cardiff and Bristol City, and immediately afterwards they've got two home games as well. So I don't think there'll be too much of. It's fallen quite nicely in that regard. There'll not be too much sort of this disruption, sort of travelling other end of the country, training getting affected. So yeah, it'll be a good chance to put Sheffield United into the national spotlight again. Obviously, you have the kudos from the Spurs game. There's been obviously one or two off the field stories that Sheffield United fans have been concerned about. This sort of flips it around, at least in on the pitch matters, and the young players there and the guys of this world. What an occasion to showcase his talents on a and in front of a nationwide audience at the home of football. So yeah, just go in and enjoy it. It's a good story.
Yeah.
And they need the money. The FA Cup prize money's been really,
£2 million, isn't it? Yeah.
really pumped up the last few years. That money's going to help as well. Possibly help them get out of this transfer embargo, or certainly, help make the situation better. But I think it's just win-win. So long as they don't, embarrass themselves against City, so long as they give up everything, and the fans clap them off at the end, then as I say, total win-win situation for them.
Yeah. It's all for Paul Agimon. It's just all about keeping players fit, isn't it, and fresh. That's his concern.
Yeah. And next we head to the Premier League, where Leeds United claimed a vital 4-2 victory away at Wolverhampton Wanderers, which saw them move up to 14th place. It is still very tight at the bottom, with 4 points separating 12th and 20th. After the international break, the Whites have a tough away trip at Arsenal waiting for them, but with 4 games coming up with teams in and around the relegation fight, could April sort of be the make or break month for their season, Stuart?
Yes, I think quite simply, yes, it could, and they're going into it in decent shape. I think it's fair to say that after everything that happened, Javi Gracia coming in as coach wasn't really an appointment that knocked people's socks off. But he's got 2 wins and a draw from his 4 games in charge now. His 4 league games in charge. He's got a bit of organisation into them, although it sort of went a bit haywire at Wolves when the game got crazy. But he's having a decent effect on them. He's getting some confidence into them. One would hope that 2 weeks further down the line they can get a lot more minutes out of Rodrigo, a lot more minutes out of Bamford. Rutel have that much more time. I've had that much more time on the training ground. Getting used to his environment and so on. They're moving in the right direction. It's so tight down there that you can't really rule any team, in or out of the relegation battle at the moment. Who knows what effect Roy Hodgson's going to have on Crystal Palace? But as you say, after the game at Arsenal, which is like Sheffield United's game at Manchester City, it's a game that in your mind you sort of write off, and anything you get is a bonus. 3 big home games then, Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace, and Liverpool. And Liverpool will be strong favourites, but Leeds have beaten them once already this season at Anfield. So if they can have a good April, and there's the scope there to have a really good April, then they can make May, a little bit more comfortable. This is Leeds United, so they almost certainly won't. But that's the way they've got to look at things.
Yeah, I mean he's coming. Gracia, he's won. I think it's 2 out of 4 in the league, and I think every Leeds fan would have taken that when he came through the doors. Yeah, Stuart's spot on. It looks like April, doesn't it? That's the month that looks definitive for Leeds. The home games there. They've obviously got. They've got Leicester, haven't they, towards the end of the month as well, and a trip to Bournemouth could really do with getting it sorted out then, because you look at what they've got a bit further down the track. They've got Newcastle, they've got City, even Tottenham for all their all their issues at the minute. They're still in a handy position on the last day. So yeah, I mean it's really good 3 points for Leeds, and what sounds a bit of a crazy game. It's at Wolves, and I think as well with Rodrigo. I mean, him coming back, they can wrap him in cotton wool. And we're talking about managers with Sheffield United wanting the key players to be mentally fit and physically at the best for the running, and Leeds will certainly be wanting that with Rodrigo, as he got 13 goals this season. Think about it's in double figures in the league. There's not too many sides at the bottom, who've got strikers who are in double figures, and he could be a trump card in that regard. The Leeds has had a pretty good season, so he could be the key man for Leeds, in my opinion.
And we look at it from a Leeds perspective. To actually be there at Molineux on Saturday, as I was kind of a mindset that since Lopetegui had come in, Wolves would be okay because he'd done a really good job there. But it just felt like a really, really demoralising defeat for Wolverhampton Wanderers that just, probably made their fans think we are really in this battle. And they picked up 2 suspensions as well, which could be quite lengthy suspensions too. So just there were lots of layers on it from a Wolves perspective to really drag their morale down. So it was kind of a double win in that respect. And I say same applies to these games coming up against Forest and Palace. If Leeds can win those games, those teams, those sets of fans are going to become really nervous. And Forest, their chances of staying up are basically built on home form. So if you could get the City ground nervous, albeit with an away win, that's only going to help you. And obviously Palace have got this terrible record of not having won in 2023. So again, if you could draw these teams in, there's a lot of psychology involved in the relegation battle as much as anything. And that's, I say, so that it was just a big win on a lot of levels for Leeds United, and one that should have been actually quite comfortable when they were 3-0 up early in the second half. But the fact that they were made to fight for it only sort of added to their levels of satisfaction, I think. Really.
I think looking at the teams down at the bottom, it looks like there's quite a lot of them. They'll certainly be playing each other before the end of the season. It could well be one, if not two slots even could be determined by how well sort of teams fare against each other in that mini league. From a Leeds perspective, everyone will be hoping that they can get a positive return of form. They're going to be out of it, aren't they? But conversely, there could be another side who drop it, who go down because of that, really, because of the results in the mini league between now and the end of the season. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But I look, looking at Leeds' games with the being at Ellen Road for the majority of the games against teams around them, Leicester, Forest, Palace, they've got to go to Bournemouth. They've just got to really use that to their advantage.
Yeah. And now we turn our attention to the Championship, and we start with Middlesbrough, who are snapping at the heels of Sheffield United after a 4-0 victory over Preston North End. Their next game is away at struggling Huddersfield Town, followed by a crucial home game against table-topping Burnley. They certainly look comfortable for a playoff spot, but do you think they've got enough to mount a real challenge for automatic promotion, Leon?
Well, I mean, they've got a chance. It felt like a significant game for them against Preston last time out. I mean, if they'd have not won that, obviously Sheffield United weren't playing, then the gap would have potentially looked too much. It did feel like a big game in Middlesbrough's season. I'd gone to the game in midweek against Stoke, and fair play to Stoke, they should have won that game. They were excellent, and it sort of begged the question why they are where they are, really, in mid-table. But I think we've spoken about before on the podcast that sometimes teams who have sort of underachieved, and then it gets towards the end of the season start having a bit of fun, and maybe Stoke are doing that. They obviously played Norwich in the next game last weekend, and by all accounts they should have won that. They're in a good lick of form. Yeah, there was a little bit of pressure on Middlesbrough going into that. There was some nerves among the fan base in the game against Stoke. I thought, a few questions, but it was an emphatic answer, wasn't it? And to be fair to Preston, they're a little bit in a similar-ish bracket to Stoke. They've been sort of probably underachieved a little bit, but still dangerous. They've been strong away from home. But yeah, Middlesbrough came to the party. Akpom absolutely flying, isn't he? I think he scored in something like 10 of the last 11 home games. Still got half a chance of getting 30 goals, which is staggering, really, because he missed part of the autumn as well with injury, and Cameron Archer as well. They look to play some scintillating football, and as well as Middlesbrough have done, you felt like they sort of needed that almost after the events in midweek. There'd been a lot of talk after they'd beaten Swansea in the previous game Sheffield United, we're coming for you, and then obviously on the Tuesday night they dropped points, and United got a good win against Sunderland, so they're sort of still in the game in that regard. They've just got to keep chipping away, Middlesbrough, haven't they? I mean, for a bit of context, I think Stuart was right to say, talk about it last week, that in the final leg of last season, when they were, after the last international break of last season, they sort of fell away a little bit. I think they only won 3 out of 9 and missed out on the playoffs. So there's that little bit of perspective for them. I think they're stronger now. The buys that they brought in January in Archer and Aaron Ramsey have contributed more than Balogun and Connolly did when they arrived for the second half of last season. There looks goals in the side. They're playing well, but they've got some tough games to come. I mean, they've got Huddersfield next up. They're going to be reinvigorated by the great win they had at Millwall, and it might just be a fixture that's right up Neil Warnock Street. Roll up your sleeves, and he'll certainly, as night follows day, will really talk up Middlesbrough before that game. Rightly so, and he'll play the underdog card. So, and they've got some other big tests as well. They've got to play Norwich. They've got to play Luton. But on the other side of the coin, teams are going to be wary of Middlesbrough in that sort of form, because they were, they really did take Preston to the cleaners.
Yeah, I mean, the way Middlesbrough are going, if they can just continue in this vein, it just means that Sheffield United just can't afford to come off it. If Sheffield United see the job through and Middlesbrough carry on like this, then you've just got to hold your hands up and say, well done. And, we wish this had started sooner. But, you look back on that Stoke game and it was quite a demoralising night for Middlesbrough. As Leon said, they should have lost the game, but they didn't lose the game. Even on a bad night, they still got a draw. They've still got this formidable home record. So I just think, whichever of the two misses out, it's going to be they can consider themselves very unlucky, and it's going to be a bit of a kick in the nuts, frankly, to whoever ends up in the playoffs. They've got to make sure that doesn't linger over and affect the players, because you would certainly say from this perspective, those 3 teams, top 3 teams at the moment, all deserve to be in the Premier League. And however it happens, it would be nice to see that happen. But yeah, I mean, from Middlesbrough, I saw Carrick asked after the game at the weekend if the international break had come at the wrong time, and Carrick being Carrick, he just gave a non-answer sort of thing of we'll see. If you're looking for negatives, if you've got that sort of defence mechanism as a fan of trying to see what could go wrong, then that would be a concern. They're in such good form, you'd like them to just carry on playing, but there's no reason why they can't pick up where they left off. Akpom, as Leon rightly says, is an absolute goal machine at the moment, but the important thing is they're not relying on him. Cameron Archer got 2 the other day. Michael Force chipped in. Others are scoring goals as well. They're just in a cracking vein of form. They're doing all they can do, and I say if it turns out not to be enough, then so be it. But you've got to give huge credit to the way Michael Carrick has transformed them this season.
Yeah, I mean, he's cool as a cucumber as well. Isn't he? Obviously, we've spoken before about his playing days at, more especially Manchester United, where this end of the business end of the season, there's huge pressure every week, and it's about walking the walk and not talking the talk, and he did that for seasons on end. And I think as well, this perspective as well. You look at, I think I wrote in my preview before the Preston game last weekend. I actually went to the game at Preston in the reverse fixture, and Middlesbrough lost that in the last minute in the 21st. They were only out of the relegation zone on goal difference, and I think the team below them were Coventry, and they actually had a couple of games in hand. So it's important to keep remembering how far Middlesbrough have travelled, and they're in an outstanding position that no one would have certainly envisaged at the start of November. So the supporters need to sort of remember that sometimes and really sort of grasp this time for what it is, because it's been a remarkable run. But they're obviously going to have to keep the foot on the pedal if they're going to somehow overhaul Sheffield United.
And also, we focus on his time at Manchester United and his experience of winning titles. But if it comes to it, he won a playoff final with West Ham as well. So he has been down this route before as a player. It's not all been about that top end. So maybe we there's been talk about his inexperience as a manager. Maybe that might be one area where his experience kicks in. But that's quite a way down the road yet. We'll wait and see. Wait and see what happens in the meantime.
Yeah, and I would say, people would say if Sheffield United did miss out, or if it's Middlesbrough, Sheffield United who end up in the playoffs, I still think that whoever it is will be the team to beat.
Yeah. It's purely how they respond to that disappointment. I think that would be the only concern. But certainly on talent, those three teams are, just impressively ahead of the rest, really.
Yeah. And next on the agenda is Hull City, who, after their 1-1 draw away at Reading, sit comfortably in mid-table. Is there anything left for them, for the Tigers to play for this season, Stuart?
Yes, there's always something left to play for when you get paid to play football. Hull City have had great support, particularly away from home this season, thanks to Ajinil Ijali laying on those coaches. They've had great support from him in the transfer market and what have you. They should be doing their absolute utmost to repay those supporters who've been through some pretty thin times. And next summer will be when Liam Rosenior really sets to on making this a Liam Rosenior Hull City squad. So there's players who will be, playing to be part of that if they're not careful. I mean, Leon made reference the other week to how even stalwarts like Jacob Greaves have been left out of the lineup. Nobody's safe here. If people aren't meeting Rosenior standards, they won't be at that club next season. And I think, there is the potential for it to be quite an exciting season next season. So they should be doing their utmost to make sure they're on board with it. They should be, playing for their own personal pride, and they should be looking to repay the supporters. So, regardless of whether they can go up or go down, they can play with more freedom, as we've mentioned before. But there's still responsibility on them. They still have a job to do. And, when they're playing games like that, the next one's against Rotherham, for example, they've got a responsibility to the rest of the league as well, to Cardiff City, to Huddersfield, to QPR and teams like that, to make sure that Rotherham have a really hard game at the K-Con.
Yeah, they've got some, totally agree with that, of what Stuart said. They've got some, cracking games, away trips especially. They've got to go to Blackburn, who are flying high. They've got to go to Middlesbrough. Got to go to Luton last day of the season. Also got to go to Sunderland as well, who've had huge crowds this season. So, really good occasions. And, if Hull are to do anything at this time next year, they're good barometers and good gauges for them. And as Stuart said, with the senior, he comes across, he's quite an erudite, a well-spoken lad, calm in his utterances, but there's certainly a bit of steel there. And, he's shown that on occasions this season. I think if players don't want to be with him and travel with him in the same direction, he will, he'll move them on. And they're all trying to play their way into his plans, and he's obviously he'll have his own. He came in mid-season. He'll have his own ideas for pre-season in terms of what he would like to bring in. And I'm sure there's a fair few there who will be judging over these games, whether they can convince him that he's part of the plan. So they just got to enjoy it and relish it. They've got the free travel for the supporters. I'm sure they'll be taking a fair few fans to Sunderland and Middlesbrough. They're not the longest trips in the world. And yeah, and if they can just get some positivity going into the summer, and obviously it's going to be all about next season then. And Hull have sort of briefly sort of flirted, didn't it? I suppose right on the edges of the playoff talk. earlier this winter, but they'll obviously be having the designs on being the real deal next season.
And next up is Rotherham United, who, after their bizarre abandonment of their game against Cardiff City, sit worryingly close to the drop zone. With an away trip to Hull coming up after the international break, what does Matt Taylor sort of need to do to sort of keep the Millers safely on?
Yeah, I think worrying is the word, Mark. It was obviously at the start of the week. It sort of promised a fair bit, didn't it? Rotherham had gone into it, they'd beaten. I think they've beaten QPR, haven't they? They've got a good point at Swansea. Games against Birmingham, Preston, and Cardiff. There was high hopes. Get a decent return of points from them to set them up for the running when they've got some toughies. They've got like some West Brom, Norwich, Luton, Burnley. They've got Borough as well. Real stiff tests. And I was at the abandoned game on Saturday. They kept saying postponed, but I think technically it was abandoned, really, wasn't it? It sort of lasted 48 minutes, and then an almighty torrential downpour, which I've not really seen the likes of that for a good while. But I mean, it was. They lost the 2 games against Birmingham and Preston, and by all accounts, they were pretty well beaten, and it was certainly worrying from a first half perspective against Cardiff. They were very much second best to Rotherham. Cardiff as well, obviously they're in it, and it was a big game for them, and they looked pretty good on the day. And you sort of, not from a Yorkshire Post perspective, but you sort of felt a little bit for the Cardiff supporters in the respect that the side were playing really well, comfortable at half time, winning 1-0, then start the second half, and an absolute talent of Rayner, and the game ends up getting called off, and it was certainly a better abandonment for Rotherham than it was Cardiff. A lot of talk about what happened on the day, and I just think it was it's an act of God, really, totally unprecedented weather conditions. We all had our cups of tea in the press room and came out, and there was a little bit of rain coming down, but from then until the start of the second half, the heavens did literally open and saturate the pitch. There was, the referee had no option but to take the players off. There was a lot of standing water on the perimeter of the pitch, and it was starting to lay in the middle. I obviously came back for another look a bit later when the rain had relented a little. Had a look at 4:45, and the perimeter areas. There were 2 or 3 ground staff, and they were trying to sort of brush away the water. But it was just a losing battle. There were 1 or 2. Obviously, Cardiff manager Lamucci wasn't particularly happy. Felt more could have been done, but I think the bottom line was when they came out for the second inspection, and the ball was dropped on the pitch. It just actually, it just literally stopped, and there was just no way that fixture could have been, fulfilled. That on that day there was just too much water, and there was a lot of water outside the ground as well. So obviously the EFL are investigating it, but it might have just worked for Rotherham in many regards, because they were flat and second best, and they looked disjointed as well. When the game was on, Cardiff were dominant in the first half and didn't look like a relegation candidate either. So maybe Rotherham got a break there.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder if Tony Stuart wasn't doing a sneaky rain dance somewhere at half time, because it certainly did work in their favour. I mean, it just felt, from looking from outside, as though Rotherham just needed that international break to come, so they can get Ollie Rathbone fit again, because he was such a big player for them before this groin injury caught up with it, and to get Tyler Blackett a bit more up to speed, having arrived as a free agent. Leo Helder's, by all accounts, had a bit of a dip in form, just to allow him to get a second wind, and for people like John Hugill and Lee Peltier to get a rest. And and be able to go again. So I'm kind of hoping it will work in their favour. I mean, one thing it will mean, looking at the fixture list, realistically, there's only it's only the last 2 weeks of the season that Cardiff game can be replayed. Although, Rotherham fans know from their last time in the Championship, there's never too many games the EFL can ask Rotherham to play in a week. But if they stick to the normal conventions, it'll be very late in the season. And obviously Cardiff, as Leon said, will be very aggrieved about this abandonment. There'll be a lot of spice on that game, particularly if those teams are as close in the league table as they are right now. So that's going to be one heck of a game. But yeah, I just think Rotherham needed that opportunity for a breather and a regroup. And as I mentioned in a previous podcast, I've probably seen the best of Rotherham really in the last couple of months. I've certainly seen what they're capable of when they're at it. They just seemed like they were just running a bit low on energy, maybe starting to feel a bit sorry for themselves. Who knows? With the injuries piling up. But if this can just be a bit of a refresh and a reset, and they can come out all guns blazing against Hull, we might actually be saying, after all the hard luck stories of the last couple of years, that for once Rotherham have had a bit of a lucky break here in the Championship.
Yeah, it could be. You're right to sort of talk up the Cardiff game there, Stuart. It could be one of those end of season occasions at the New York, which I've been quite well versed in. I remember it must be about I think it was 2014-15. Rotherham, similar situation under Steve Evans. They were in a real relegation scrap, and they had a huge end of season midweek game against Reading and managed to get over the line and won that. And I think that was the famous one where Steve Evans had said beforehand, if we say before the last day game at Leeds, I'll wear a sombrero and shorts, and he actually did that when he walked into Ellen Road. So yeah, in terms of Rotherham's history, they've had some, midweek nights at the New York. They've had some big ones and you just wonder if there might be potentially another against Cardiff.
And finally in the Championship, we have Huddersfield Town, who surprised many after getting back to winning ways against Millwall. Although still in the bottom three, they are only 3 points off safety. Can Neil Warnock work his magic again, Stuart?
You just never know, do you? It was looking lost before that Millwall game, but you just can't write Neil Warnock off. It still looks like a tall order. And you say they surprised a lot of people. I think the people they probably surprised the most was their manager from some of the comments after it. But what he's like. He's a wily old fox, and Leon's already alluded to the fact that they've got his old club Middlesbrough straight after the break. He's going to be pulling out all the psychological tricks for that one, and so he should. They've just got to use everything in their favour. But to win at the New Den, let's get it right, is always a good result, regardless of whether Millwall are in the sort of form they are. But really important as well. Warnock's been talking ever since he came in about the importance of Danny Ward. That was Ward's first goal since they played Rotherham in October. That's huge as well. For his self-belief. So they've just got to grab onto every little positive going and just squeeze the life out of them. And if they give it everything they've got, as Warnock keeps saying, then that's all you can ask, really. But it's been a real, considering he's one of the older, more experienced managers, it's been a real sort of roller coaster of emotions since he's come in. There's been no stability in that regards at all. One minute you think they've got a chance, the next minute you think they've got no chance, and then they go and pull out a result like that. So all I would say is don't try and second guess what's going to happen. If you're not a Huddersfield fan, sit back and enjoy it. If you're a Huddersfield fan, sorry, you're going to do a lot of nail biting between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, it's us against the world scenario, isn't it? And I think Neil sort of loves that, doesn't he? I think they've got 5 of the last 8 against against the top half. And God, there's some spicy ones as well, isn't there? Obviously the Middlesbrough game. Obviously, was particularly happy when he got the boot at Middlesbrough, but there's still a fair amount of respect there from the Borough supporters towards him from what he actually did, and he did keep them up. In my opinion, one season in the COVID year. Then after that, they've got Watford, and I think it's fair to say that himself and Chris Wilder aren't the best of friends in football circles, and a bit further down the track, they've obviously got Sheffield United as well, which could be an absolute humdinger. Cardiff away as well. So, yeah, he's as Stuart said, he's right to try and pull out every psychological trick in the book. Neil Warnock, he's done that for many, many years, and he's done it successfully. And sort of looking at Town, they obviously took a couple of heavy beatings early on in his tenure, but I think they've only conceded 2 goals in 4, so that suggests he's sort of building a bit of resolve. If they got any clean sheet at Millwall at any time is to be applauded, isn't it? And they obviously got a clean sheet against Bristol City, did fairly well defensively and showing character against Norwich. So it looks like one or two of the senior men are stepping up. Stuart's mentioned Danny Ward. I've been impressed by from what I've seen of Tom Lees as well, and Mikkel Hellick. They're good centre halves at this level. And there's obviously the likes of Jonathan Hogg as well, and one or two other players have put their hand up, likes of Jack Redoni, and he's just got to have to bring them all together, create a bit of a siege mentality, and get a real sort of club, them and us sort of mindset. And one or two of the younger lads are chipping in as well, the likes of Ben Jackson. So you just look at the games. I think they've got 2 of the next 3 at home. Certainly need to win at least one of those, and I think they've got 3 away games not long after that as well. And do it the hard way, but never write a Neil Warnock side off.
And the other side of that Sheffield United semi-final we were talking about, of course, is that the game, Sheffield United's game at Huddersfield now is the last Wednesday of the season. Be the day Sheffield United send Neil Warnock down. That could be the day Neil Warnock ruins Sheffield United's promotion hopes. Anything could happen, really. As Leon says, that fixture list is just absolutely full of subplots. I mean, didn't even mention the fact that they could go to Swansea, and I reckon there's an outside chance that the Swansea fans might acknowledge the fact that Neil Warnock used to manage Cardiff. There's so many levels to those games to come, and that's what you want if you're Warnock, because you've really obviously the squad's got its limitations, so you've got to use every trick in the book. You've got to use that siege mentality. You've got to find every possible way you can to make it us against the world. And as Leon says, their goals conceded record suggests he's getting them into that mindset. Whether it's enough to keep them up or not, who knows? But they're going to fight. They're going to fight till the end, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And finally for this week, we turn to League One and Barnsley, who produced a spectacular 4-2 victory with 2 late goals, which brought Sheffield Wednesday's amazing 23-match unbeaten run to an end. What were your thoughts on the game, Stuart?
I absolutely loved it, Mark. I know Sheffield Wednesday fans didn't, and I know they won't like me saying it. But I mean, even their team showed great fight, because Barnsley blew them away with their intensity in the first half an hour, and Wednesday just didn't look at it. So to get it back to 2-2, that showed you why Sheffield Wednesday had gone 23 games unbeaten. Real spirit, real getting stuck in. But then Barnsley got a second wind, and you have to say they're just in fantastic form. Their confidence must be sky high at the moment, having beaten Derby, Plymouth, and Sheffield Wednesday. Even though Plymouth won and went top, they'll be worried about Barnsley, who are 8 points behind but got 2 games in hand. It was just a really, really good advert for League One. And we'll probably talk a bit more about the League One picture in depth next week. But you couldn't watch that game as a Barnsley fan, or as a sort of League Two fan in general, and not just be be proud really of that. It was proper League Two football. It wasn't the absolute pretty stuff you sometimes see in the Premier League, but there was the right mix of skill, because there was still plenty of skill in there, and fight and passion from the supporters. 5,000 Sheffield Wednesday fans really made for a great occasion, because then the Barnsley fans had to respond in time, and it was just a really, really good game to watch. And I say, I know those 5,000 won't have enjoyed it at all. I think everyone else who was watching it will have absolutely loved it.
Yeah. I mean, they're in the game, aren't they, Barnsley? In terms of the top two picture, I think they've won 10 out of 12. They're unbeaten in that time. I think the interesting thing will be that I mentioned it off air earlier that by the time Plymouth take the field again in the league on Good Friday, they've obviously got the EFL Trophy final against Bolton, isn't it? And by the time they're back in league action, Barnsley could be 2 points behind them. Obviously got the trip to Ipswich game was off, but they've got to go to Exeter next week, and then they've got a home game with Morecambe. Sheffield Wednesday could be 7 in front. They've got 3 games in that same window before Plymouth are back in action. They've got to go to Forest Green, Cheltenham. They've got a home game as well. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating how that pans out, and we could really have an outstanding race for. I thought it was a playoffs first, but it's more automatic promotion really, and obviously don't discount Ipswich as well. They've got a big game to come at Oakwell, and there could be a side or two that miss out on the top two with a massive amount of points. But from a Yorkshire perspective, how nice would it be if Barnsley and Sheffield Wednesday were the ones sitting in the top two come May the 8th or 9th or whatever it is, and not having to mess about with the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a real pity that Barnsley Ipswich game isn't going ahead this weekend, because Ipswich have been in such good form as well. That would have been an absolute cracker too. But hopefully by the time it comes round, there'll no doubt be even more riding on it. That should be another good game.
YorkshirePost.co.uk.
Many thanks to Stuart, Rayner and Leon Wobschall, who will doubtless join us again soon for more discussions on the Yorkshire football scene. But don't forget, you can keep up to date with all the football news across Yorkshire and beyond by logging on to our website at yp.sport@nationalworld.com, or if you search for Yorkshire Post Sport, Yorkshire Post Football or even Sheffield Sport on Facebook, you can find us there as well. If you have any questions for our writers, you can get in touch using those various Twitter or Facebook pages, or email us directly with the subject matter as Football Talk Podcast at yp.sport@nationalworld.com. As ever, many thanks for listening, look after yourselves, and bye for now.